The struggle is real. Becoming a homeowner is a cornerstone of the American dream. But as you see, right now, many people are even getting pushed out of their rentals and eventually out of their communities, which is igniting the debate over rent control. Join me now, co-founder and chief strategist at GDP Advisors, Seth Denson. Seth, thank you so much for joining me. So Seth, I've never been a fan or have supported the idea of any sort of rent control. But these days, I think there's a debate to be had.
I mean, there is, but this is supply and demand across every other spectrum that we see, specifically in the housing market. The last shot that you played talked about hedge funds. Well, that's true. 1 in 5 houses bought in Q3 of 2021 was done so by a corporation, not by an everyday American. And that's what we're seeing right now. We're seeing hedge fund managers, we're seeing funds, investors. They're all buying up these houses, which is reducing the overall supply. But you combine that with the fact that in the United States today, we've got about a 6 million single-family home shortage. And so you combine that with the fact that investors are buying up these houses. There's not enough supply to go around. And then, you mentioned at the very top of this, Stephanie, these 19% raise in rent over all the 50 metro cities. But you specifically said, Miami, which is almost 50%. That average in those, we'll call them more red basis state cities like Dallas, like Miami, that's really lifting it up. And even going back to Manhattan, where rents have returned, they're returning in large part because people aren't thinking they're going to stay there. They don't know what to do. And so that's causing rents to go up as well.
Yeah, the 50% increase in Miami is significant. And as you pointed out, there's reasons why supply demand, and that is so many people fleeing the blue states, probably to get to a state where it's a little freer, a little bit nicer, closer to the beach. You can't blame them. But just overall, the rental increase, 19, 20%, that is crushing for the average family. And I guess, I'm just thinking in my personal situation, if you look at the numbers here in San Diego, they said they saw spikes of more than 25%. I'm a victim of that. I got hit with a 25% increase. It's a lot of money. California is very expensive. And, fortunately, I can get by, but I'm thinking about everyone else who is on a super, super tight budget. You'd have to make some serious decisions when it comes to balancing your budget at the end of the month to pay your rent. When you get hit with these notices that your rent's going up by 20%, 25%, and then you start looking around, oh, well, can I move? Well, then you look at your whole area. The whole area has gone up as well. So you get pushed out of your community.
Yeah, I heard a story recently of a senior gentleman who was retired on a very limited fixed income, and his rent had gone up so much he had to leave his childhood home in the town that he'd been in since birth to move to live his final days in a town he knew nothing about because it was the only place he could afford to find a place to rent. And this is the sad reality. And when you couple what's going on in the housing market with rents, even if for those that can try to find a house, they're having to overbuy a house. There's paying more, and that chicken's going to come home to roost someday. But when you couple that with the overall inflation rate on everything else, fuel, food, you name it, it is putting everyday Americans in a very precarious position to try to figure out survival. And unfortunately, many of them are having to leave the places that they've called home for so long in order to do that.
And then when people are pushed out of their communities, there's not many places to go. You look at the expense. It's just gone up overall. And so it is really concerning because, as I pointed out, home ownership is part of the American dream. And the fact that people can't even find places to rent that are affordable, and not everyone is, suffering, and not everyone this is an issue for, but just in general. And then you pointed out all the other things that you have to add on top of this, which is inflation and grocery prices and gas and everything else. It adds up.
It certainly does. And like I said, when you start adding in those other things and you start thinking about that young American entering into the workforce, trying to get started out, perhaps having massive college loans, trying to get their feet out from under, a big part of that American dream is that first buy of a house so that you can get in there, start building equity, not paying a rent to somebody else. They don't have that option, so they're left paying rent, and now they're paying inflated rent. This is just a vicious cycle that we're in, and raising interest rates, which is coming up very, very soon, is not going to help that at all.
Definitely won't. Well, Seth, we're going to leave it here. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Steph.